In the early hours of August 11, 2015, Beijing police officers entered the Inner Mongolia Hotel located in the Chaoyang district of the city. They were keen to speak to a guest who'd recently checked in connection with the disappearance of a young woman attending the nearby China Communications University. Police had serious concerns about the young woman's safety as officers had received an extremely worrying emergency call 2 days prior. In a weak voice, the woman managed to give the operator an address and said she needed an emergency response as she was bleeding heavily. As her voice faded, she gave her blood type as B and went on to say she was gradually losing her vision. The operator sent an alert through the system and tried to get more information from the stricken caller. When asking the woman to confirm the address given, the operator overheard a male voice speaking and asked the woman to hand the phone to the other person in the room. The clearly rattled male voice gave the same building and room number, but a different residential community. The operator then asked what was wrong with the injured woman, to which the man responded saying she was bleeding, breaking down in tears as he spoke. Pressing for more information, the operator asked the location of the injury, with the man saying he hurt the woman's neck, before hanging up the call. When 22-year-old Zhou Yun Lu was reported missing the following evening, police quickly came to believe she was the person who made the emergency call. Born 1993, Zhou Yun Lu moved to Beijing from her hometown of Yixing, a city in the southeastern province Jiangsu, after gaining admission to the China Communications University, where she chose to major in film studies. While much of her course was more about the technical aspects of film and television production, her main ambition in life was to become an actress. Friends of hers had grown concerned after she failed to return to the dormitory on the evening of August 9 without informing them she'd be staying out. Zhou Yunlu had told her friends that she was going to meet another student after seeing an advertisement for an acting role in a small film project on a WeChat group chat, the Chinese equivalent of WhatsApp. The following day she was supposed to attend a friend's wedding banquet in Zhuozhou in the neighboring Hebei province, so when she failed to return to the dormitory, her friends attempted to contact her. However, when they tried to call, they found her phone was turned off, and messages sent on WeChat went unanswered, something that was very out of character. When she still hadn't returned the following morning, the friends began posting messages on various social media platforms, asking if anyone had been in contact with her. As hours passed with no sign of Zhou Yunlu, her friends decided to contact her parents and informed them their daughter appeared to be missing. The father, identified with the pseudonym Mao Mo, immediately began trying to call Zhou Yunlu, but like with the friends, her phone was turned off, and his WeChat messages received no replies. In the meantime, friends of the missing woman had been doing their own investigation work, discovering that the advertisement Zhou Yun Lu responded to was posted by a former student who attended the university, Li Sida. As with Zhou Yun Lu, attempts to contact Li Sida through social media went unanswered, so the students visited one of the faculty heads to report their friend missing and ask for more contact details for the former student Li Sida. The department head was very familiar with Li Sida, remembering him being one of the more creative and talented students attending the film school, before he was eventually kicked out of the university. Li Sida failed to answer any attempts to contact him, so with one student missing, and Li Sida possibly being the last person to see her, the university called the police to investigate. On being informed of the situation, the father and older brother of the missing woman decided to make the 1,100-kilometer journey to Beijing on the first available flight and help look for her. Her father continued sending messages to his daughter's WeChat, telling her he was coming to find her. Thinking that she was perhaps being held captive, he addressed messages to the person he hoped was holding her, saying he was prepared to pay for the safe return of his daughter. When Zhou Yunlu was officially reported missing, police were reminded of the phone call they'd received on August 9. Emergency services had been dispatched to both locations given during the call, but found nothing strange or unusual at either address. Given the serious nature of the call, police had tried looking around the wider area, but made little progress finding the caller. With officers now having the name Li Sida, an investigation team set about trying to track down the 23-year-old former student. Born 1992 and native to the Henan province city Xinxiang, 600 kilometers to the south of Beijing, Li Sida quickly garnered an infamous reputation for being perhaps the most eccentric student attending the university. He was raised in relatively comfortable financial conditions, with both his parents being teachers who stressed the importance of education on him from a young age. He took his parents' words on board, performing well as a student, soon displaying a talent for artistic and creative endeavors. He showed a keen interest in poetry and creative writing, but especially enjoyed playing the piano, at which he'd become quite talented. Getting excellent results in the college entrance examination when graduating high school, it was little surprise that he chose to study at a university that specialized in various media disciplines. When he arrived at university, his fellow freshman students were soon introduced to his idiosyncratic behavior. Chinese students are subject to compulsory military training, once before starting high school and again before beginning the freshman year of certain colleges or universities. The training lasts for between 7 and 14 days before the school semester begins, and is little more than marching, team-building exercises, and classes in basic first aid. While participating in the training, his dorm mates discovered Li Sida slept with a large knife concealed in his bed, and enjoyed posting photos of himself brandishing the weapon online. Once the semester started proper, his new peers found themselves introduced to the full range of his character quirks. He'd tell people to refer to him as Da Shu, meaning Uncle Da, which they found a little odd, as in China, when not a relative, uncle is only used as a term of endearment for someone older. However, once his classmates got to know him, they gave him a new nickname, referring to Li Sida as Xi Chi, which can have the double meanings of drama enthusiast or drama idiot. He often spoke and laughed in an overly dramatic tone, as if he was permanently on stage, performing a play. When going to the showers and back to the dormitory, he was often seen walking around the dorm building completely naked, without bothering to cover himself with a towel. There were times other students found Li Sida sitting alone in the building stairwells crying, sometimes while still naked. On many occasions his peers heard him aggressively barking like a dog when he walked around the campus alone. During lectures and classes he would get up and wander around the classroom or lecture halls for no apparent reason and start singing. On one occasion, after the professor told him to be quiet, he climbed on a desk and stood there silently for the remainder of the lesson. Despite his odd behavior, his peers still respected his obvious talent and creativity. He wrote and directed several plays that were performed at the university, with them receiving glowing praise from students and staff. He also wrote numerous poems and short stories which he published on his personal social media accounts. The stories often revolved around the investigation of violent criminal acts, in which his descriptions of the crimes were extremely detailed and graphic. On successful completion of his undergraduate course, he then applied to participate in postgraduate studies. However, he suddenly appeared to lose interest and stopped attending the compulsory classes to be accepted. He told his classmates he didn't care about earning his degree, and eventually the university kicked him off the course with only a certificate of completion for his earlier studies. He returned home for a short time after this, but didn't tell his parents about no longer being a student, meaning they continued to give him financial support. Returning to Beijing, and despite his parents financing him, Li Sida went out job hunting, eventually finding work in a luxury car showroom. He was hired to play piano as customers browsed, receiving a surprisingly decent monthly salary of 5,000 yuan, a little under $800, more than most average salaries at the time. Despite him being in a more professional setting, he wasn't able to hide his eccentricities, which ensured he didn't last long. The music was supposed to provide a pleasant atmosphere as customers looked around the showroom. However, Li Sida often started screaming at the top of his voice, singing along to the music, or standing up and dancing wildly as he played. He was expected to dress smartly while performing, but usually turned up in dirty clothes and slippers. When the showroom manager asked him to dress in a more professional manner, he came to work the next day wearing an almost comically oversized tuxedo. When other staff members of the showroom greeted him, he would immediately stop what he was doing, stand to attention, and salute the person. His odd behavior saw him fired, but he soon found another job, teaching at a music learning center, where he taught piano. Once again his character quirks saw him being fired, his former boss describing him as weird and not good communicating with people. Li Sida attempted to find success in other ventures to earn money, which included online stock trading, but they quickly failed, and saw him losing the money he'd saved. His only source of income was the money his parents were sending him, still thinking he was studying for his master's degree. With him no longer living on campus, he needed to rent a small room in the city. Unlike those who knew him at university, his former employers and colleagues, his neighbors also found him somewhat unusual. The neighbors were often disturbed by Li Sida playing loud rock music at all hours of the day, usually the same song on an endless loop. But when residents of the building came to the room demanding he turn it down, he never opened the door. One resident, tired of the racket, went to the fuse box to the apartment building and turned off the electricity to the room Li Sida rented. But he still didn't come out to investigate. He just sat silently in the dark until the following day. When he wasn't playing music, Li Sida could often be heard shouting loudly and dramatically to himself, apparently reading scripts. Around this time, his social media posts grew increasingly dark, constantly referencing the desire to do harm to himself and others. At the same time as his own life was seemingly failing, he saw posts from his fellow alumni who were moving on with their lives, finding work in the media. Eventually, Li Sida placed an advertisement on social media groups for students at the university, saying he was looking for an actress to play a role in a short movie he wrote, and Zhou Yun Lu, seeing an exciting opportunity, answered the call. A year below Li Sida, Zhou Yun Lu frequently participated in stage productions put on by other students in the department, attempting to put together a body of work in her hopes of becoming an actress. So when seeing the chance to appear in an actual film while getting paid, she felt it was an opportunity too good to turn down, and messaged Li Sida. The Inner Mongolia Hotel was only 500 meters from the Communications University. Once Zhou Yun Lu was reported missing, and Li Sida was named as a person of interest, police quickly found he'd checked into a room in the hotel from the registration of his identity card. When police arrived at the room, their knocks on the door went unanswered, so they asked the front desk to call the room and check the hotel's security camera footage. The camera showed that Li Sida hadn't exited the hotel after arriving, meaning he must still be in the room, but he wasn't answering the phone. Officers asked hotel staff to open the room's door with the master key and grant them access. Disheveled and looking confused, Li Sida was trying to hide behind the door when the officers entered the room and ordered him to sit down before questioning him over the whereabouts of Zhou Yun Lu.
在哪儿呢？在哪儿呢？
在我们出租屋里，那个阳光家园，你知道吗？
啊，
那个
怎么在出租屋里啊？你给锁是给他锁屋里了吗？
啊。
He told the officers she was locked in an apartment he was renting.
为什么给他锁屋里啊？
你
给我说，先说，怎么回事？
因为我做了傻事儿。
什么傻事儿啊？活着还是死的？现在这人？啊！我问你，活着还是死的？快点儿！
对不起，是。
靠！
When asked why she was locked in the room, he eventually admitted he'd done something stupid, and when pressed to give more details, he confessed to ending her life and apologized to the officers. Li Sida was placed under arrest and took officers to the location of the apartment, where they found the lifeless body of Zhou Yun Lu. When Li Sida first posted the advertisement, he claimed there would be a full film crew present, and that the actress would be paid 500 yuan, slightly under 80 USD per day. It was initially answered by a former classmate whom he knew quite well, but on reading the script and knowing Li Sida to be somewhat eccentric, she became uncomfortable and dropped out. As in his previous writings, he'd penned a crime story, with a young woman working as an escort being kidnapped and held captive by a dangerous criminal. Unfortunately, when Zhou Yun Lu answered the casting call, she did so without reading the script beforehand. While the pair were a year apart, studying different majors, and Li Sida already leaving the college, thanks to his eccentric behavior and reputation for being a creative director, Zhou Yun Lu knew about him. They were familiar enough to greet each other when walking around the campus, but that was the extent of the relationship. When she arrived at the apartment being rented by Li Sida, she immediately noted that they were alone, and asked where the rest of the crew were. Li Sida told her he wanted to rehearse some scenes with her first, to see if she was suitable for the role. In the scene, she was to be bound to a chair while her captor, played by Li Sida, forced her to beg for her life. He showed her the props they'd be using, which included tape to bind Zhou Yun Lu to the chair, and a knife he assured her was fake. Claiming he wanted a sense of realism, Li Sida said it was better to actually bind her to the chair during the reading. Wanting to get the role, Zhou Yun Lu agreed, and allowed Li Sida to tape her legs to the chair. The pair acted out the scene, but the intensity shown by Li Sida made Zhou Yun Lu feel increasingly uncomfortable. She asked him to calm down and to release her, but after cutting the tape holding her to the chair, the scene became all too real. Li Sida attempted to force himself on Zhou Yun Lu, who fought back fiercely. However, her unwillingness to submit angered Li Sida, and he lashed out, striking her with the knife in his hand. Zhou Yun Lu received several injuries to the neck, causing her to bleed heavily. Li Sida got up and went to the bathroom to clean himself up. While he was gone, Zhou Yun Lu, knowing she was badly injured, reached out to her handbag and got hold of her phone. She managed to make the call to the emergency services, but with her not being especially familiar with the area, and her life quickly fading, she gave the operator the wrong address. When Li Sida came back into the room, he saw her on the phone and grabbed it away from her. Speaking to the operator, he gave a different address and told them about the injuries to Zhou Yun Lu before hanging up. Li Sida then took 800 yuan, around $130 USD, from the handbag and exited the room, leaving Zhou Yun Lu to bleed out on the apartment floor. When later being interviewed by police, some of the neighbors admitted that they'd heard noise and shouting coming from the room, but given what they'd become used to while Li Sida lived in the building, it didn't come across as especially unusual. As they touched down in Beijing, the father and brother of Zhou Yun Lu were met by police, who informed them the young woman had been found dead. Getting over the shocking news, they were then taken to the medical center to formally identify the body. When officers began interrogating Li Sida, they started with asking if this was something that just got out of hand, but he left no doubt that his actions were premeditated. He confessed that he'd become miserable over his inability to earn money, and the fact he'd never had a girlfriend in his life. He told officers he was looking for excitement, so came up with the idea to advertise an acting role to get a woman inside the apartment. The script he wrote was effectively little more than a fantasy he wanted to realize. He became overwhelmed with the desire to vent his anger towards someone innocent, and violently unleash the years of pent-up frustration. After the first young woman got cold feet, he was more than happy when seeing Zhou Yun Lu had answered the call, and told the interviewing officers he felt no ill feelings towards her, she was just unlucky. He showed little remorse throughout the interrogation, and seemed completely indifferent to what he'd done, even laughing several times during the interview. He was charged with the violation and intentional homicide of Zhou Yun Lu. However, the trial would be delayed as his defense team demanded a psychiatric evaluation to assess his mental competency after learning about the unusual past behavior. In response to the tragic incident, the university held a memorial service for Zhou Yun Lu, and later her funeral would be attended by hundreds of students from the university. And while the attendance and outpouring of emotion showed that Zhou Yun Lu was a popular young woman who'd be greatly missed, some people in online spaces pointed fingers of blame at the victim. They argued she was incredibly naive to go to the location alone, and even suggested she likely teased Li Sida by flirting with him to get the role. Then when she rejected Li Sida, he flew into a rage, which resulted in her death. Other students at the university quickly came to her defense in media interviews, and also exposed a seedy side to attending film schools. The students spoke about the culture of jiexi, which literally translated means signing an acting contract, but colloquially means picking up a play. Networking and making contacts was seen as vital for any student wanting to work in the film or television industry, and there was no shortage of predatory organizations prepared to take advantage of that. The university allowed trusted companies to advertise jobs, and strongly advised the students against taking work from any other organizations. However, competition was fierce and positions got taken quickly, leaving those that missed out looking to pick up a play, taking any job offered to get their start in the industries. While some of the offers came from small independent filmmakers and were genuine, many times the intentions of those advertising work were not so savory. Both male and female students found themselves in positions where they'd be pressed or forced into exploitative casting couch situations with threats of never working in the industry again, if they failed to please. When responding to the attacks on the character of Zhou Yun Lu, her friends made it clear she'd never picked up a play and just performed for the university. She only replied to the advertisement posted by Li Sida because she was somewhat familiar with him. After almost 1 year of undergoing psychological evaluation, Li Sida was declared fit to stand trial. Doctors concluded that while he displayed characteristics of borderline personality disorder, it didn't prevent him from being held fully responsible for his actions. The trial was eventually held on November 18, 2016, where Li Sida was sentenced to death for the intentional homicide of Zhou Yun Lu. Immediately after receiving the punishment, Li Sida stated his intention to appeal the judgment. As he was being led away, he turned to the father of Zhou Yun Lu and requested to speak with him. However, Mao Mo angrily refused. He'd been present every day of the trial and spoke in court several times. When Li Sida addressed him, he referred to him as Mr. Zhou. However, his family name was Mao, and Zhou Yun Lu had been given her mother's family name. Each time he'd spoken, the court addressed him with the family name Mao, which left him furious that Li Sida obviously paid no attention to his words and didn't care enough to learn his name. Mao Mo told Li Sida he had no interest in anything he had to say, adding that there was no point listening to a dead man. The appeal was heard on May 25, 2017, but Li Sida still showed little remorse for his crime. He simply argued that he believed his life was coming to an end thanks to the feelings of depression he experienced, and that it was only natural to have extreme thoughts when the end is near. Ultimately, the appeal was rejected, and the death sentence upheld. On September 9, 2019, after the judgment had been reviewed by China's Supreme Court, Li Sida was executed for the intentional homicide of Zhou Yun Lu. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a like, leaving a comment, and subscribing to the channel. And hope to see you again for the next dark tale from the Middle Kingdom.